It's your turn.
Hi, my name is Tamara, and my presentation is about perception of positive deviance, especially exploring the students' gender and emotional expression on their perceptions by others. So in my project, I basically explored how an overachieving student's emotional display after receiving their grades and their gender affects others' perception of the student. And overachieving students count as a positive deviance because they go above and beyond on society's expectations academically. And their perception depends on contextual nature, meaning that different people can see the same overachieving student as in a positive way or in a negative way. For example, parents and teachers are more likely to see overachieving students in a positive way compared to their peers. There is little research on how positive deviants are perceived, especially the factors those influence those perceptions. So in my research, I looked at two of the factors. I used effect control theory to create my hypothesis, so I will talk a little bit about that. Effect control theory based on the premise that social concepts, including behaviors, settings, and emotions, have moderately fixed affective connotations, which are named fundamental sentiments. Fundamental sentiments are operationalized using three universal dimensions. Those dimensions are evaluation dimension, which is about how good or bad a fundamental sentiment is. Potency dimension, which is about how strong or weak a fundamental sentiment is, and activity, which is about how active or inactive a sentiment is. Those three dimensions give us an EPA score, and those scores change according to different concepts and sentiments. For example, the EPA score of a female student and EPA score of a male student will be different. As you can see, the EPA score of a female student is higher in evaluation score, but lower in potency and activity. So the main proposition of ACT is that people use their behaviors and perceptions to match their fundamental sentiments and transient impressions. Transient impressions are the momentary impression of an event after the event occurred. It's about the elements of an event, and people want their fundamental sentiments and transient impressions to match as closely as they can get. So they are kind of using their behaviors and perception of a situation to do that. ACT is based on information formation equations, which are provided by a computer program called Interact. And Interact uses the equations to simulate social interactions. So I created 8 two-step simulations using Interact and used the EPA scores from those simulations to create my hypothesis. The first two simulations are in my good grade category, good grade condition. And in this condition, a teacher praises a female and a male student. The EPA scores I get as students' emotions are students' predicted emotions, meaning how ACT predicts a student would feel like after they were praised by their teacher. Those simulations followed by my self-directed disappointment conditions, and in those, the students felt disappointed in themselves after they were praised by their teacher. And also, I had the self-directed approval conditions, and in this condition, students feel approved of themselves after they were praised by their teachers. I did the same for students who get average grade. In the good grade simulation, I used the word praise as to show that students did a good job in their school. And in average grade, I used the verb urge, showing that students is an average student. And in the average grade simulation, teacher urges a female and a male student. And those simulations followed by the female and male student feeling disappointed in themselves. It's again in the urging, it's students' predicted emotion. How is a student supposed to feel like after they were urged by their teacher? And self-directed disappointment one is how students actually feel like if they felt disappointed in themselves after they were urged by their teacher. And the same for self-approval situation. how a student actually feels like after they approved of themselves after they were urged by their teacher. So I created 4 hypotheses using the Euclidean distance of the EPA scores from the following simulations. And my first one is students who engage in positive deviance will be viewed as more deviant than those who do not, meaning that students who got good grades and were praised by their teachers will be seen more deviant than students who got urged by their teacher in the average grade condition. My second one is students who express self-directed disappointment will be viewed as more deviant than those who do not, meaning that students who felt disappointed in themselves after they were praised and urged will be viewed as more deviant than students who approved of themselves. Third one is self-directed disappointment will moderate the effect of positive deviance, with disappointed deviants viewed as more deviant than non-disappointed deviants, meaning that the students who got good grades and still felt disappointed in themselves will be seen more deviant than students who got urged and felt disappointed in themselves. My fourth one is gender will moderate the effect of self-directed disappointment, with disappointed male students viewed as more deviant than disappointed female students. It's just predicting a gender difference between the perception of the students. So in here, I add the EPA scores into the same table. And as you can see, those EPA values are the values of how the student is supposed to feel like after they were praised by their teacher. And the following values in the self-directed disappointment is the values of how students feel like when they were praised and felt disappointed in themselves. And as you can see, there is a really big difference in between them. I took the Euclidean distance between the first simulations where students were praised and the second simulations where they felt disappointed in themselves, and created and used those simulations to use the Euclidean distance to calculate how deviant a student is seen. I did the same for the female students. I did the same for the students who felt approved of themselves after they were praised by their teachers, and those are the Euclidean scores. And I also did the same for my average grade conditions. Those are the EPA values of how a student is supposed to feel after they were urged by their teacher, and those are the values of how students actually felt when they felt disappointed in themselves after they were urged, and the Euclidean distances, and the same how students felt after they were urged by their teacher and felt disappointed, felt approved of themselves, and the Euclidean distance for that. I will not be able to explain how I came up with all four of my hypotheses because I don't have enough time, but I used the same logic in creating all 4 of them, and I will explain how I came up with my first hypothesis, which is about students who engage in positive deviance will be viewed as more deviant than those who do not. So in here, students who engage in positive deviance are students in the good grade condition. They were praised by their teacher, and they under the assumption that they did well in their schoolwork. And I took the average of the Euclidean distances in the good grade category and came up with 3.94. I did the same for the average grade category and came up with 3.18. And I assume that the bigger Euclidean distances means the students being perceived as more deviant. And because 3.94 was bigger than 3.18, I hypothesized that students who engage in positive deviance will be viewed more deviantly. For my methods, I used a vignette study, meaning that for each of the 8 interact simulations I created, I also had a vignette comparable to them. One of my vignettes is as follows. The teacher for a high school advanced placement calculus class explained that the scores on the midterm were disappointing, with a class average of 68%. The teacher explained that the exams were not cured because of the higher score, 98% was so high. Jessica, a student in the class, received her midterm score 98% and a handwritten note from her teacher praising her for receiving the highest grade. So until this part, this simulation is This vignette is comparable to the first interact simulations, and this one is teacher praising a female student. The rest of the vignette is comparable to the second simulation, and the rest is, after she saw her score and the note, she started to cry. When other students asked her what was wrong, she said, "I only got 98%, so I am really disappointed." So those part is comparable to the second simulation, which is female student disappointing female student, disappointing herself. And in my 7 other vignettes, I changed certain parts so that each vignette is comparable to one interact simulation. And I changed students' gender and name by naming the student Brad in half of my vignettes. In half, students get an average grade, which is 75%, and with the grade, they also get an handwritten note from their teacher urging them to do better. And in half of the grade, students did not react crying to their grade. They had no noticeable reactions, and they felt satisfied with their grade. For my methods, I recruited 294 participants using Prolific. Prolific is a survey platform in which you can pay the participants to solve your surveys. Participants were randomly assigned to one vignette, and after reading their vignette, they were asked their questions to measure the perception of how they perceive the students. As you can see, I have the question I asked the participants right here. I had different dimensions in that questions in which I averaged all those dimensions together to create a deviance measure. My measure had an high inter-item reliability with an alpha reliability score of 0.90. I was able to find support for my first hypothesis, and it stated that students who engage in positive deviance will be viewed as more deviant than those who do not. And as you can see in model 1, the coefficient for students who get good grade is seen significantly more deviant compared to students who did get average grades, showing that students who engage in positive deviance were viewed in a more deviant way. My second hypothesis states that students who express self-directed disappointment will be viewed as more deviant than those who do not. And as you can see in the still model 1, the coefficient for student who cried after receiving their grade and felt disappointed is seen significantly more deviant compared to students who did not show any emotion and were satisfied with themselves. My third hypothesis states that self-directed disappointment will moderate the effect of positive deviance, with disappointed deviants viewed as more deviant than non-disappointed deviants. As you can see in the second model, the interaction effect of getting a good grade and then feeling disappointed and crying is seen significantly more deviant compared to the interaction effect compared to students who did get a good grade but did not cry and felt satisfied of themselves. And my fourth hypothesis is gender will moderate the effect of self-directed disappointment, with disappointed male students viewed as more deviant than disappointed female students. However, I couldn't find support for this hypothesis. As you can see in Model 3, the interaction effect of female students crying is not seen significantly more deviant than the male students who cry, meaning that my participants did not find any gender difference when they were perceiving the students. As a conclusion, I find a link between overachieving students' emotional reactions and their success, which is positive deviance, in affecting others' perception of the students. However, there is still more research needed to understand other factors, such as different participants' attributes and different characteristics of the students, and how they influence the others' perceptions of the students, and whether my findings can be applied into different settings such as work environments. That was my study, and thank you for listening.